Over the coming months, you're going to have box seats to one event that guarantees to alter the fabric of our nation. As it happens, you'll see the price of everything skyrocket. In fact, on April 15th of this year, World Bank President Robert Zoellick warned the world saying, "The global economy is one shock away from crisis in food supplies and prices. It gets worse." Everyday items from gasoline you put in your car to the coffee you drink in the morning will become so expensive that many Americans will have to choose between heating their homes this winter and feeding their families. At the same time, you're going to see schools and police stations shut down, roads go untreated, and a provoked public will take to the streets as unemployment hits unthinkable levels. In a word, it'll be chaos. And the worst part is that Congress, the Treasury, the Federal Reserve Bank, leaders of other nations, even the President of the United States know it's coming. But they're turning a blind eye. They want to postpone the riots we've seen across Europe and the Middle East from hitting our shores for as long as possible. But as you'll see, we've already gone past. Probably know me from financial publications like Wealth Daily and Energy and Capital. They're currently circulated through more than 80 countries around the world, several of which I have personally traveled to in order to meet various CEOs, venture capitalists, and other major market movers. For the past 6 years, I've dedicated my life to mastering the global economic chess match. And in my line of work, it's crucial to know exactly where the policies of yesterday and today will land us tomorrow, or several months down the road. Trust me, it's no easy task. Fortunately, I'm able to uncover the truth, because unlike people in Washington and Wall Street, I'm not tied to political parties or corporate media, and I've been able to time some of the best investments the markets have to offer. For example, I've helped thousands of investors protect themselves from the devastating effects of skyrocketing oil prices between 2005 and July of 2008. It's that freedom that also allowed me to openly predict the housing crash and fall of banks across the country like Lehman Brothers and Bear Stearns. That freedom enabled me to find the right places for people to put their money to build their wealth, as others watched their life savings evaporate when the rest of the markets tanked. Throughout this entire economic mess, investors following my advice have done nothing but compound their wealth. As I say this, not a single position is down. Listen, I didn't create this video to brag, and I certainly have no interest in selling you a one-trick pony. Instead, I simply wanted to point out that, unlike many pundits on TV or lawmakers in Congress, my research doesn't lead toward any point of view, though sometimes it leads me to shocking and unpopular conclusions. This time, I spent several months and a small fortune researching the Federal Reserve's quantitative easing decisions, and how its effects are rapidly destroying America's sovereignty each day. I made this short video to inform everybody what is about to happen, and the simple steps I've personally taken to ensure that when the dust settles, my financial situation won't be left in ruins. I know that many of you might believe you're well ahead of the game already. I'm sure that after oil prices first reached $147 a barrel, you thought about what you would do if gas prices reached more than $10, $12, or $15 a gallon, or what you might do if the cost of clothing more than quadruples over the coming months. You might have even thought of your Bare Essentials grocery list if food prices skyrocket, or how you'd handle Enron-sized electricity bills. You might start carpooling to work or work fewer days. You might plan to drive only when you absolutely need to and skip family vacation. Perhaps your old beat-up shoes could last another several years until the treads are completely worn through. If food prices get too expensive, then you might only eat what's absolutely necessary, and if you weren't a coupon clipper, you soon will be. If your electricity bill surged, you'd probably use your air conditioner less in the summer, and bundle up inside during the coming winters. But what would you do if all of these events happened at once? What if, with each passing week, the price of everything you need to maintain your lifestyle jumps? With no end in sight, your retirement savings, the savings you scraped together throughout your entire life, simply couldn't keep up. Even worse, imagine how people not as well prepared might act. And this would all be thanks to the Fed's outright destruction of our dollar in a desperate attempt to keep our country from defaulting under the weight of its own debt. In other words, are you prepared for nationwide chaos as unemployment, a crashing dollar, and skyrocketing food prices spiral out of control? It's a situation that you might have thought was long off, but the sad reality of it is that a global collapse, the likes of which have never been seen, has already started. I don't say these things lightly. In fact, I don't want to say them at all. The world's greatest bond investor, Bill Gross of PIMCO, said these very words on April 1st, 2011. "Unless entitlements are substantially reformed, I am confident that this country will default on its debt. Not in conventional ways, but by picking the pocket of savers via a combination of less observable yet historically verifiable policies, inflation, currency devaluation, and low to negative real interest rates." And if that wasn't bad enough, on April 18th, Standard & Poor's lowered its outlook on the U.S. government's credit rating to negative, setting the nation's very large budget deficits, and rising government indebtedness. And this time, you don't need to study the Weimar Republic or countries like Zimbabwe to see how people respond when inflation spikes. All you need to do is tune into the news of virtually every other country. The poorest ones, like Tunisia, are naturally hit first. For what seems like an eternity, people put up with high unemployment, political corruption, and living conditions so low that most of us couldn't even fathom. But in December of 2010, a universal need pushed people over the edge. Thanks to recent skyrocketing inflation, the citizens could no longer afford to eat. The middle class were starting to starve. There's an old saying that came about just before the fall of the Roman Empire in 100 AD, used to define the temperament of oppressed people: bread and circuses. It generally means that people will put up with nearly all sorts of tyranny and injustice so long as the mob has food and entertainment. What you're witnessing across the world now is what happens when food becomes too expensive. Feeling the same pain in just days after the first protests in Tunisia, the riot fever spread to Algeria. Protesters hit the streets carrying signs that read, "We want sugar." Next to fall, for the same reasons, was Egypt, then Libya. You get the point. You hear about it every day. But what many in the mainstream press fail to realize is that these protests and riots aren't simply because of a harsh dictator. Anyone over the age of 30 knows that people like Gaddafi and Mubarak have been in power for decades. No, what's pushing countries in the Middle East and North Africa over the line is the skyrocketing cost of food, thanks to rampant inflation. But it's not just the price of food. Oil, gold, silver, cotton, corn, wheat, rubber, and every other commodity is getting more expensive by the day across the entire planet. It's a similar story right now in India as thousands risk their lives and take to the streets to show their disgust against rising prices. And in China, thanks again to skyrocketing inflation, the Jasmine Revolution has ignited in at least 13 major cities. All over the streets, the Wall Street Journal reports protesters carrying signs saying, "We want food." Inflation is so out of control in China that the BBC reports citizens can't even afford basic vegetables. To try to keep prices under control, the Chinese government has raised interest rates 3 times in the past 4 months. But it's no use. According to the National Inflation Association,